a flight attendant for American Airlines kind of had an episode on a plane and went off over the PA talking about how the plane was going to crash, and thank goodness the thing was still on the tarmac, and had to be restrained by other flight attendants. This has of course all been shot on somebody's cell phone and is on the internet for all to see. And fortunately they were able to get her calmed down and get the plane back safely to the terminal. And really just terrible for the flight attendant, terrible for the passengers, just terrible with a capital T. But when I saw the cell phone video, I thought, this is not unlike some of the behavior I've seen passengers exhibit on airlines. The only difference is this time it's one of the flight attendants, and isn't it amazing how much worse your behavior seems when someone else is acting it out? Now that's not to say there aren't things that can get you irritated about airline travel. When I say a line like that, I feel like a bad stand-up comic, but it's true. You know, like, what's wrong with airline travel these days? My wife has issues with the airlines. Janet especially does not like the blue curtain that hangs between first class and peasant class. She finds this, Janet, if you don't know Janet well, you will come to learn that she has a finely tuned sense of injustice. I mean, to a razor's edge. She was a Vista volunteer in the ghetto in Philadelphia in 1960, in the 60s, organizing rent strikes against the government that was subsidizing the apartment buildings, paid by the government to do that. She's a protester, man. And so when that blue curtain goes, shh, and they close you off from the people that get to ride in the front, and then what really twists the knife is when they announce that the people in the front have their own bathroom, but you're not allowed to use it because you're with the proletariat in the back of the plane, and you have to stand in line for 20 minutes to use a single bathroom, while this handful of people, who also get things like warmed cashews, get their own bathroom and ginger ale for free. So Janet just really does not like this, and especially the way the flight attendants make such a point of opening it and closing it with such a flair, as if to say, all this could be yours. You too could pay $2,000 for roughly the same level of service that the people in the back are paying $200 for. Do you feel like if this were the movie Titanic, you'd be with the people locked below decks while the ship is sinking? That's the message. That's you back there with them, and us up here is, this is how the world really is, and this is what you should aspire to have. In one instance, in fact, I remember her turning to a flight attendant, maybe this was the person who later had this episode, and actually telling her about the grave injustice of having us divided by this blue curtain and how completely objectionable that was. But this is what our whole system is based on. Our entire way of life comes down to one simple thing: getting from this side of the blue curtain to the other side of the blue curtain. Now, some curtains are visible, the Iron Curtain. Some curtains are invisible, like south of LA, they have something called the Orange Curtain, that you can't exactly see, but it's very effective at sheltering Orange County from everybody else, from the rest of the world. The blue curtain just has to be one of the visible ones. If you're involved in what we call the creative life here, if you're attending an elite university, if you're involved in business, perhaps a startup enterprise of some kind, those experiences are going to put certain curtains in your life. One of those is an inevitable consequence of coming through the kind of system that we have here in the East Bay. And it's the result of being part of a system that emphasizes that people on the other side of the curtain are special. Recently I was reading an article in American Scholar that a friend sent to me. It was written by a man who did his PhD at Columbia and taught English for 10 years at Yale. He's a pretty well-known literary critic and writer. And he tells the story of coming through this enormously influential Ivy League education and arriving at the other end of it with this job and all these accolades and all these awards, and yet finds himself standing in his kitchen with his plumbing not working. And a plumber arrives to fix whatever it is that is malfunctioning. And this critic confesses that although he is able to speak to people from other countries in other languages, he has no idea how to talk to a plumber. He cannot imagine this man's world. He doesn't even know the words. He doesn't understand the whole Boston Red Sox hat on sideways. He doesn't get the whole thing. And so he's standing there frozen by the very training he's received. And you know, after enough years of being told how special you are, some people actually start to believe it. And that's what hangs the curtain. In Road to Perdition, it's one of my favorite gangster movies. John Rooney, who's played by Paul Newman, who's the aging Irish mob leader, is in a meeting with somebody you know as Tom Hanks, but in the film is called Michael Sullivan, and they're talking about the nature of the criminal enterprise that they are involved in. And Mr. Rooney says this: "This is the life we chose, the life we lead. And there is only one guarantee: none of us will see heaven." Now, I don't know about the heaven part there theologically, but that phrase, "this is the life we chose," jumped out at me because the creative life is a life you choose. That's one of the things that starts to separate you right from the beginning. This is the life. And that life can go a lot of different directions. For a lot of us, it's going to put us on the other side of the blue curtain. You know, there's nothing wrong with being there. What worries me is what the struggle to get there does to our hearts. What it turns us into to get to the other side of the curtain. This month we're looking at what we call the creative life, the life we chose. And last week we talked about God and my stuff, and I encouraged you to worry about that. About what to do with stuff. Today we're going to talk about God and my status and what it means to have to navigate this reality of the curtain. Jesus always traveled coach because he walked everywhere. He traveled peasant class everywhere he ever went. And we meet him today in the 20th chapter of Matthew's account of his ministry. He is walking one last time to the city of Jerusalem. He is literally a dead man walking because he is on his way to the final confrontation, not only with the religious authorities of the day, but also with the Roman occupying army of the day and its military force. Those two forces are going to come together along with a mob that demanded his blood, and they're going to send him to the cross. On this road trip, he makes his third announcement that he's headed to the city not to be a triumphal king or a conqueror, but to die as a suffering servant for the whole world. 3 times he's told his followers this, his closest 12, plus the others who are traveling with him. And after the third time, as Matthew records in chapter 20, Jesus sees a woman approaching him with her 2 sons. Now, this woman is someone who had traveled as part of the larger group of people who were keeping him company. They had come down from the northern part of the country called Galilee on this long walk to Jerusalem. So he knew who this was. He knew the 2 sons as well because they had been with him also from the beginning. But in this culture, that kind of conversation is simply not done. For a woman to approach a man in public like this, especially a rabbi, is wildly inappropriate. Women are not permitted to be followers of rabbis in this context, and for her to walk up to him is just, it would be like me spotting Jay-Z and Beyonce at the San Francisco airport and running up, Jay, you're in town and you didn't call, man. And at this point, armed security has wrestled me to the ground. You know that scene that you hear about on CNN sometimes? Because that's just so wrong on so many levels. You just don't, you don't do that. And so for her to approach Jesus is kind of the same thing. So how is she getting away with it? Well, for several reasons. One is that in the culture of the day, a woman could get away with asking certain questions that a man would not be allowed to ask. Somewhat like marriage in our day. An older Jewish woman also had much greater social influence than other people would have. And it's possible that this woman is the sister of Jesus' mother Mary. In other words, she's his aunt. Now, Jan and I have traveled in multiple other cultures where aunts have enormous influence. It may look like the men are running things on the surface, but behind the scene, if Auntie says something about what's going on, she's carrying a lot of mojo in that situation, and it's very much like that in the day that Jesus is walking this particular road. And so she's got, if not cultural permission, she's at least got an asterisk next to one of the rules of her culture that allows her to walk up to him. And so she draws near, and Matthew records that she gets down on her knees, and her two sons are there probably behind her as she talks to Jesus, and they are James and John. These are men who, roughly 3 years prior, had been fishermen. They had been partners with their father, Zebedee, and they had also had a kind of lateral connection with Peter, who was another fisherman. And the accounts of their lives include that their father's business had hired servants involved. So they were doing, in the context of the day, very, very well. They would fit right in on the East Bay. They were waterfront people, and they were startup people. And that's us. Jesus, walking along the shore of the Sea of Galilee, had spotted them in their boat, mending their nets, which is what fishermen did between the seasons of fishing at night. He called them out to follow him, to become fishers of men, in his phrase. And the Bible records that immediately they left their father, they left their partners, and they started following the Lord. They became very close to him. In fact, John became the follower who was probably the most close to the heart of Jesus on a relational level. And they saw all the things that he was involved in. They were with him on a mountaintop one day when he was transfigured, almost like the spotlights of heaven came on and shone down on him. They saw this amazing experience. They were with him when a wealthy man named Jairus had his daughter raised from the dead. That would certainly get your attention. I mean, they had their arms around the whole experience. They had seen it all. They had done it all. And as they say, they had the t-shirt. They were in all the way. And here we are at the end. And Jesus, for the third time, has said, I am going to Jerusalem to be beaten, to be mocked, and to be killed. And in this tender, vulnerable moment, here come these three. And I wonder if he's thinking at last a word of comfort from someone. I knew my guys wouldn't let me down. I knew in the hour of my extremity, when it became clear how this was all really going to end, that everything would be all right, and that someone would step up and say that I'm with you in this. We're proud of what you're doing. We believe in what you're doing, and we're walking this whole road with you. But the conversation goes a different way. And Matthew records it this way in chapter 20, beginning at verse 20. Then the mother of the sons of Zebedee came up to him with her sons, and kneeling before him, she asked him for something. And he said to her, what do you want? And she said to him, say that these two sons of mine are to sit, one at your right hand and one at your left, in your kingdom. Now, this is like you going down to the hospice where your relative is dying and coming up beside the bed and sitting down quietly and saying, you know, Uncle Ned, it's been great to know you. And we're all so sad that the end of your life is here. We really appreciate everything that you've contributed to all of us. Well, you know that flat screen TV in your den, the really big one, the one with optional 3D? You know, really, when you're gone, should that go to Goodwill? I mean, man, you paid 2 months' salary to have that. And if we just leave it in the house, it's just going to gather dust, and really the family's not high tech enough to figure out the whole 3D thing anyway. And so if it just sits there, it's just kind of like a big dead weight loss, isn't it? I mean, really something should be done. So that's right, something should be done. And the truth is, I've got the van right outside. And if you give me your key, we're going to just drive right over to your house. I'm going to load that flat screen on the back, take it to my den. I've got the wall mount on the way from Amazon. We're going to mount that bad boy, and we'll be watching CNN in full glory, three-dimensional, high-definition, multicolor imagery in less than 2 hours. What do you say? Well, I think from the perspective of the person making the request, it all sounds very reasonable, but I think from Uncle Ned's perspective, it all sounds like somebody who is so unimpressed with the sacrifice you're making, with the end you've come to, with the fact that you're dying, that all you care about is a stinking television. And this is the feel, this is the perspective, this is the point of view that the mother of the sons of Zebedee and James and John bring. You're going to be gone anyway. So what do you say? We get the positions of power. It's almost like people who work in a presidential campaign hoping they'll get a really great job in the administration once the individual is finally elected. And at the end of 3 years of transfigurations and miracles and teachings and the Sermon on the Mount and all of the amazing stuff that Jesus has done, what these two of his closest people finally bring to the table is the fact that we were doing pretty well in life before you came along, and now we understand what you're offering us as a way for us to do even better. Thank you. Capitalism was getting it done for us, and now we have the opportunity to have capitalism plus Jesus, and we get a seat to the left and the right of you when you reign like a king over all of Israel. Now what they're doing is misunderstanding what the Lord had taught them in a chapter just prior to this in Matthew, where he said that they would sit on thrones ruling the tribes of Israel, but they missed the part about how that would be in the next world and felt that it was going to be right now, and so they had simply come to ask for what Jesus owed them. Since we're the closest, we're the best, you picked us when you went to the special places, like the raising of Jairus' daughter, like the top of the Mount of Transfiguration. We qualify for seats 1 and 2, and everybody else can fight about the rest. Jesus answered them, verse 22, "Do you not know what you are asking? Are you able to drink the cup that I am to drink?" In other words, are you ready to die the same death that I'm going to die? And they said to him, "Oh, we're able." That's a lot of bravery coming from the guys who ran away. And he said to them, "You will drink my cup. But to sit at my right hand and my left hand is not mine to grant, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared by my Father." In other words, God raises up, God lowers down. Let him take care of that. And you worry about the other stuff that I've been teaching you for the last 3 years. And when the 10 heard it, they were indignant at the 2 brothers. I suspect they were probably already jealous because of the closeness of the relationship to begin with. And once they overheard this conversation, they realized that the 2 plus the mother were trying to outmaneuver the rest of them and corner the market on closeness to Jesus before any of the rest of them had a chance, which makes so much sense in this patron-client society in which your proximity to the man is the only pathway to the top. It's the only way to get to the other side of the curtain is to get close to somebody who's already there. There are no other pathways. Now, the great thing about being part of Jesus' group is you got a new name. It's like pop music, where Sean Combs gets to be P. Diddy, or the World Wrestling Federation, where Dwayne Johnson gets to be The Rock. It's just like that. And so James and John got their new name as part of the Jesus Club, which was the Sons of Thunder. That's the name he gave them. And probably this is because of their personalities. That I'm going to guess that these are not introverts. And so when they come forward, and you can kind of see them cringing in the back, pushing the mother forward, because Jesus might, remember, these are the guys who asked Jesus to call down fire on the villages of the Samaritans who wouldn't receive him. Such tender mercy. And they're thinking, you know, if we walk up to him, he might call down fire, but he might do it on us, but he won't hurt Mom. No one would hurt Mom, so listen, Mom, I want you to go ask him. Would you ask him for us? I wonder if they spent the whole trip from Jerusalem off to the side of that dusty road, pleading with their mother to go and act as their lawyer in front of Jesus, and so they could lurk in the back until he finally gave their permission, and they could leave Mom off to the side. Notice there is no request for a throne for her. And they step forward and say, yes, I knew we deserved this. We are first class. We do deserve to be on the other side of the curtain. And Jesus, thank you so much for coming to earth, for dying for our sins on the cross, to make it possible for me to ride in first class. Awful decent of you. Jesus called them to him. It's time for a meeting. Get everybody together. Somebody's mad. Time for a meeting. Jesus called them. This means the 12, which remember includes Judas and a group of women who are traveling with them and to help them and support them in what they're doing. And he says this, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. Now he's thinking here about the religious authorities. He's also thinking about the Romans and their militarism and their crushing violence and their imperialism. He said that's what people out in the world do. That's how they lead. It's kill or be killed. It's eat or be eaten. That's the whole way the world works. Whether you're on a street corner packing a 9 or you're in a hostile takeover situation in business, it's all the same. It's just a question of what your gang is called. It shall not be so among you. Here's the line in the sand. Don't be like that. Talk to plumbers. Don't be like that. See, this is the lecture the mom should have been given, right? Doesn't that sound like your mom? Don't be like that. Don't you do that. Don't you go up to Jesus and ask him for some cabinet level position. What are you thinking, son? Don't be like that. That's everything that he came to teach us the opposite of. This is what the Romans are doing. This is what the Pharisees or the religious people, this is what they all want. They all want on the other side of the blue curtain so they can accumulate as much power as they possibly can and then let that power fall like rain on everybody else who's riding back there in coach so they can feel good about themselves and have their warmed peanuts while the world starves. Don't be like that. But whoever would be great among you must be your servant. And whoever would be first among you must be your slave. Even as the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. You know, have you ever seen people wear the WWJD bracelet? What would Jesus do? My personal favorite is the WWJT bracelet. What would Jesus tweet? But WWJD is a little more popular. You know, really, I think that's the wrong question. Because Jesus only ever did one thing. Think of it this way. When you are in the beginning with God and you are God, when you are the one in whom all things cohere, when you are the Alpha and the Omega, when you alone possess immortality and dwell in unapproachable light, when you are in a love communion with the Father and the Holy Spirit so intense, that love is so overwhelming that it issues in a statement like, let there be light. and you speak planets into being by simply thinking it. When you wear photons like a trench coat and stars like hair product, when everything that is in you, and you are the ground and foundation and source of all being, when you are everything that ever will be, when you are the beginning and end of all of it, when you are anything we will ever need, when you are what we know, who we know, and all we know, raising the dead is a coffee break. Healing the sick is downsizing. When you have the fullness of the Godhead dwelling in you bodily, and yet you've laid aside equality with God to step down out of that into this time-space dimension and be with us and let us kill you for the sins that we've committed and the things we've never done but are so deeply rooted in our heart. If they ever got out, it would be a nightmare. And you've allowed all of that to happen because the love is just so intense. You can't do anything else. When that's who you are, then stepping down is sacrifice. Every breath you draw on this planet is sacrifice. Every step you take is sacrifice. Every time you raise your hand, it's sacrifice because you've made yourself one of us. How could you do that? The method of saving us, which is sacrificial death for our sins on the cross, is the manner of our life, which is also sacrifice. Laying aside the idea that I have a right to anything and taking whatever God has put in me and treating it as a gift to be given to others. Whether it's my spouse, my employee, my sweet mate, my significant other, whoever that is, whatever God has put in, I am not the owner, I'm just renting. I am only the letter carrier, I am not the message. I don't have to ask what would Jesus do, I know what he did. He sacrificed, and all he's asking me to do is the same. You know, the Bible records that when he died on the cross for us, he paid the price for our sins, that the veil that separated the most holy place in the temple from the rest of the world, the curtain, was torn down the middle. And in his death, that blue curtain splits. And Jesus himself stands between the people in first class and the people in coach and says, in me, we're all the same gang. We're all the same gang. We're all the same gang. I went to a city council meeting last Tuesday, my first one. It's an issue that I thought was important. I went as a private citizen, just to speak my mind. And there were talks and speeches and things, and then the mayor announced that anyone who wanted to give a speech about this issue that we were there to address had 2 minutes. And so I kind of lingered because I'd never seen a city council meeting before, and I'll call it 35 people rushed for the microphone. Because in Berkeley, it's never a problem to get people to say things. And they lined up all the way to the back. And each of us got 120 seconds exactly, with a huge red digital timer up on the wall. And when your time was up, somebody from the council cut you off. And there was no grace here, no encores. You were done at 120 seconds. So I was about 30th in line. And I mean, it was, an archaic expression would be the long and the short and the tall. It was everybody, people in costumes, people in big hats, straight edge business people, urban planning experts, homeowners, young adults who lived in apartments. It was everybody you can imagine, and everybody got 120 seconds, and some of the speeches were just great, and others weren't even about what we were in the room to discuss. It was about galactic radiation and forces and vibrations in the universe and buildings making shadows on the street. And I didn't even understand some of it. But when I came from that thrilled, Because no matter who you were, or what your language was, your background, or what color you are, or what nation you're from, everybody got 120 seconds. No more, but not 1 second less either. And for those few moments, we were all brothers and sisters. Because until something equalizes things, until something levels the playing field, we don't have real brotherhood, real sisterhood, real togetherness. This is what Jesus has done. By tearing that veil of separation between us and God, he has torn the veil of separation between you and me, between the person seated next to you and your own heart. So talk to the plumber. I'm going to ask you to stand with me if you would, please, and our band's going to come back and lead us in just a bit more worship. And as they do, if you'd like to have somebody pray with you this morning about anything that may be going on in your life, I have some of our leaders here off to the left and the right. They'll pray with you in a discreet and tactful way. Or if you just want to worship right where you are, that's great. Or if you don't really even know what worship is, but you just like listening to the music, that's cool too. Let's just open our hearts and let the Lord speak to us.